The Royal Canadian Mounted Police state that every year between 70,000 and 80,000 people are reported missing. The overwhelming majority of these cases are solved in a timely manner. However, in a small minority of cases, things are less clear. In this video, I have compiled a number of these kinds of disappearances that each contain odd elements. Lynn Mary Hilliar was 2.5 years old when she disappeared from a heavily wooded area in Vancouver in July of 1986. At the time, Lynn was staying with her parents, sister, and grandparents at a cabin on Horn Lake. The moment of disappearance isn't all that clear other than Lynn obviously must have wandered away from the cabin at some point for some reason that isn't known. This particular cabin was pretty secluded with one road in and one road out, and the family were inside the cabin when this took place. So it seems that one way or another, Lynn had let herself out, which is strange because her parents stated that she didn't have a history of doing this and was usually glued to them. Around 300 searchers kept their hopes alive Sunday as they combed dense woods near this Vancouver Island community for Lynn, who went missing from her parents' cabin on Thursday, but they admit that time is running out for the toddler. There is speculation that she might have been mauled by a bear or cougar, drowned, or is slowly passing away due to exposure. We have to go on the assumption that she is still alive out there, said RCMP Staff Sergeant Ron Nicholas. Your guess is as good as mine about her chances, but we have to keep on hoping. Nicholas discounted suggestions that Lynn might have been taken. All the evidence is that she is in the bush, Nicholas said. The reason for the quick dismissal was twofold. Firstly, authorities absolutely do not want to give people any reason to panic, and so will often outright dismiss that in any disappearance that isn't absolutely clear cut. The second reason, and probably more important in this instance, is the fact that, as said previously, there was one road in and one road out. The family never saw anyone else while they were there, and obviously no vehicles or anything like that. Another point that should be cleared up is that Lynn actually disappeared on the 24th of July, and the first article I could find was on the 28th of the same month, so she'd been missing for 4 days already, despite 300 searchers scouring the area by this time. Now it seems to me that the authorities were spooked and obviously very concerned here because they put some serious effort at getting the word out, and quite literally the following day there was over 400 people searching. Meanwhile, the search force looking for Lynn grew to more than 400 people Monday, but police say that time is running out for the little girl. Searchers have checked and rechecked the thickly wooded area surrounding the cabin, using dogs and infrared scanning gear, said Ron Nicholas. We've just about exhausted all leads, he said. Time is running out, if it hasn't run out already. The search has been widened to cover mountain and valley areas it was originally believed that the little girl couldn't reach. Somewhere along the line, we've covered all this ground. It just doesn't look good, said Nicholas. Clearly, because of the time lapsed, 5 days at this point, there was an atmosphere around the search that things were not looking good anymore. This was fueled, obviously, by the fact that they hadn't located her, but it was actually worse than that. Not only had they not located her, they couldn't even determine where she might have gone. Somehow, she'd left no trace of her presence anywhere, no footprints or anything of that nature. The searchers were of the opinion that they should have found something by now because she was 2 years old and really shouldn't have been able to get very far. They also made note of the fact that there were no signs of animal predation anywhere, which is usually very clear and can't really be mistaken. I'm absolutely certain that behind closed doors they must have been considering the idea that Lynn may have been taken, because after the time lapsed and nothing at all was being found, there are very few alternatives. The following day, Ron Nicholas effectively said that there had still been no trace of Lynn at all, and that they were considering winding down the search and bringing it to a close. True to his word, the search reportedly came to an end the following day. A week-long search for Lynn was called off yesterday. "We've just called the official search off," said Ron Nicholas. Police say they have no reason to believe that she was taken, but her great-grandfather, Ernie Miner, posted a $25,000 reward for her safe return. It was said at this point actually that not only did the family disagree with the authorities, but so did a lot of the searchers too. Many were of the opinion that Lynn wasn't even in that area anymore. This was because they hadn't found a trace of her, and the search dogs never once found a scent. However, a discovery would be made 3 days shy of a month after her initial disappearance. Lynn's body was discovered Tuesday after she vanished from her parents' cabin July 24, has been taken to Vancouver for a forensic examination. The body was found in dense brush about 30 metres off a logging road by 2 men scouting for signs of game in preparation for the fall hunting season. There were a couple of peculiarities with this find. Firstly, the searching parties had been present in this area initially and obviously didn't find her. This could mean that she was found in an area already searched, though there's no way of saying if they checked that specific spot or not, though the dogs never found a scent. Secondly, something the searchers found strange was the fact that she had travelled quite some distance, all uphill. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a distance from this spot to the cabin, only that she had supposedly travelled uphill the entire time. Let's have a look at the moment of discovery. Lynn's body, apparently, was under a piece of fallen timber, said Nicholas. It would appear she slid in under the log and that's where she expired. There's no evidence at the scene to indicate foul play, Nicholas said, adding there was also no sign the girl had been attacked by an animal. Lynn hadn't sustained any injuries as far as I can tell, and obviously Nicholas made the point that she hadn't been attacked by an animal. There were no further reports after this, and the circumstances of her disappearance largely remain unknown. Lynn, who was known for being glued to her parents, wandered away from the cabin and made her way uphill for reasons we don't know. The searchers weren't sure how she got to a final destination, nor was she found when this area was searched previously. Was she there the entire time? What happened to Lynn Mary Hilliar? 7-year-old William Pilkington disappeared from the small town of Tofino on Vancouver Island in February of 2008. This town has a small population of around 2,000 people. At the time of his disappearance, he was with his brother and parents who had travelled from Bellingham to have a relaxing vacation in the small town and to visit the beaches there. David, William's father, had woken up early one morning during this trip and decided to go for a walk on the beach to pass some time before everyone else got up. As he was getting ready to leave, William heard him and asked to come with him. Now, it's pretty difficult to imagine the situation exactly, because I couldn't find much in the way of specific reporting on this. But at some point during this walk on the beach, William disappeared. From what I can gather, William kept lagging behind as he was getting distracted and was playing in the sand. The father kept hurrying him each time he realised he was behind him, but the final time he would look back for William, he simply wasn't there anymore. Volunteers poured to Vancouver Island on Friday, offering their help in the search for an 8-year-old Washington State boy, last seen playing on a rocky beach. The parking lot of the Tofino Community Hall was packed with police and rescue vehicles, as well as the cars of local residents who showed up in rain gear and boots. Adjacent to the beach, bordering with thick woods, and unfortunately the search leaders had no idea where he might have gone, there were 3 ideas floating around. The first being that he might have gotten too close to the water and been swept away, that he might have wandered into the woods and got lost, or he might have been taken by someone into the town. It's important to note that David never heard anything to suggest that William had fallen into the water, and said that he was actually nowhere near it when he last looked. It's also noteworthy that there wasn't anyone else on the beach at that time either, and they were alone. Obviously, I don't know the exact distance between the pair at the time, but I believe it was around 30 feet or so. It seems unlikely to me that he would fall into the water and you just wouldn't hear anything, though of course we don't have much context. It's also hard to imagine that someone might have taken him here too. Given the small population, it makes events like this less likely, though of course not impossible. And again, David had said that he didn't see anyone else nearby. Garth Cameron of West Coast Inland Search and Rescue said it was the biggest search in the area in a long time. Searchers fanned out across the town and into the woods, resorts and beaches. By evening, crew members lit a bonfire where William was last seen. Cameron said the idea of the boy making it overnight wasn't impossible. He went on to say that it was actually probable that he would. So clearly, at this stage, the thinking must have been that William had wandered into the woods. William did actually suffer from attention deficit disorder, so he will have been somewhat easily distracted. It could have been that he spotted an animal or something interesting that grabbed his attention, which caused him to wander off in that direction. Of course, we'll never know for sure if that even happened. Now, interestingly enough, footprints were never mentioned. You'd think that on a beach, you would leave clear indentations of the direction you took. That's not to say there weren't any, but they weren't reported. Over 200 searchers were present on this search, and they had a bunch of search dogs too, who never found a scent at any point, which is just odd. There were First Nations people involved too, who were considered expert trackers, and they too never found a trace of William. Searchers said that they weren't sure if William had been taken by the sea because in all likelihood his body would have washed back up onto the shore, which never happened. This search went on for 3 days before it came to an end. This seems like a relatively short search, especially since this forest area is absolutely massive. But the problem was that they had absolutely no clues whatsoever. The Canadian military helped out and put up aircraft too, but this didn't help. Ultimately, William was never found. Even to this day, not even a single clue exists as to what might have happened. Was he taken? Did he fall into the water? Or did something happen in the forest? What do you think? Eddie Hamilton was 2.5 years old when he disappeared from the Elros District of Saskatoon in Canada. This occurred on the 6th of July 1928 when Eddie, with his family and neighbours, went out berry picking. It's not completely clear what happened, but what is clear is that at some stage the family and friends must have lost track of Eddie because soon his family realised he was no longer with them. The group spent some time looking for Eddie in an attempt to retrieve him, but they could find no trace of him at all. While this was ongoing, other members of the group went to seek help. The first report of this incident that I could find comes 5 days after the disappearance from the Lethbridge Herald, who reported this on the 11th of July of that year. The Elros District today is the scene of one of the most highly organised and thorough searches for a missing person that has ever been made in the province. The quarry being little Eddie Hamilton, who disappeared last Friday when he was out berry picking with his family and some neighbours. It's important to note that for the 5 days prior this report, the official search was already well underway, and that entire time had many searchers present. Searchers noted that they were hoping to find footprints made by Eddie, but they were never found. At some stage, the lack of footprints split public thinking into two camps. Some held to the hypothesis that Eddie had simply wandered off and got lost, while others began to suspect that a third party may have been involved here and had carried him off, thus the lack of footprints. Though I'm not sure how they reasoned the said lack of footprints from the perpetrator. In any case, there'll be more on this soon. For now, let's have another look at the first article. Today, all available forces are being concentrated on the hunt. The Saskatoon Aero Club has sent one of their moth planes to the scene of activity. All places of business in surrounding towns and villages have declared a holiday to join in the hunt. It's hard to imagine something like that happening in the heavily corporate times of today, but this decision made by the business owners inflated the searchers' numbers by a lot. It was described as a volunteer search army and was thought to be comprised of over 1,500 people. The mounted police have sent reinforcements from nearby detachments to direct operations. A veritable cavalcade of autos is roaming over the countryside, and hundreds of searchers are swarming over the hills, covering every inch of the ground. The volunteer army of searchers met at the hills at 9 AM and organised under the direction of mounted police. White Bear Lake, a shallow, long strip of water at the foot of the hills, has been dragged, but without success. Just to be specific about what they meant there, they did successfully drag the lake, but they're saying that Eddie wasn't located. This is going to have some amount of importance soon. The following day on the 12th, there were some interesting comments made. The Winnipeg Free Press stated this: "The 6th day of the search at Elros for little Eddie Hamilton came to a close tonight without any clue being found to the child's whereabouts." However, they failed to mention this, reported by the Lethbridge Herald. The search is concentrated to date at a spot about 4 miles from the camp where a depression in some long grass, reported by the airplane, seems to indicate that a small person had been laying down there, and the spot has been measured and is 2½ feet long, which is apparently Eddie's height. No footprints have been found, but the fields in the vicinity are being closely combed. This is interesting because what was essentially being reported was that there were no footprints leading to the indentation, nor were there any surrounding. So I can only assume that means that there were none, indicating that someone had left the area. It's not clear what was happening here, but it's important to highlight that it wasn't proven that Eddie had made the indentation. Nor is it clear how he, or whoever else, managed to get there without leaving any footprints, which the search leaders were expecting to find. Reporting on the White Bear Lake again, the Medicine Hat News reported this, still on the 12th. White Bear Lake, a shallow, long strip of water at the foot of the hills, has been dragged again and again, but without success. Clumps of trees and thick bushes of undergrowth have been cut down, and all badger holes in the vicinity have been dug out, yet not a sign of the missing child has been found. It's interesting that the focus kept returning to White Bear Lake, yet after many repeated attempts at dragging and searching it, no sign of Eddie was found. Let's move on to the 13th. This was reported by the Winnipeg Free Press. Although the 7th day of the tireless search for Eddie Hamilton brought the vast army of searchers no nearer to their goal, there have been some interesting developments, all leading to the belief that the boy has been taken, probably by gypsies. An aged Norwegian clairvoyant says the boy has been taken and is alive and well. He claimed he was within 20 miles of the spot where he had vanished and that he would locate him inside 2 days. An Elros farmer, who is an old hand at tracking, who spent many years in India, claims to have found an important clue. He believes Eddie, instead of remaining behind, followed his father after the berry-picking expedition and lost sight of his parents when he entered a coulee, took the wrong coulee and disappeared in the opposite direction. John Gunderson was the Norwegian clairvoyant, and he went on to say that it was a man and a woman in an auto that had taken Eddie. He said that he was being well looked after and will be returned within a few days. John couldn't have been more wrong, and the searching continued on a smaller scale, and the reporting came to an end on the 23rd of July 1928. That is, of course, until October 26 of 1928, when the discovery was made. Eddie Hamilton's body was found in the White Bear Lake, the same lake that had been repeatedly searched the months prior. The mystery surrounding the disappearance of little Eddie Hamilton, which for more than 3 months has caused searchers to scout the district, was solved today when John Wells, travelling salesman, found the boy's badly decomposed body in White Bear Lake. Wells found the body when he was out duck hunting. It was taken from the water and carried into Elros, where it was identified by the parents. The lake in which it was found is about 3.5 miles southwest of where Eddie was lost on July 6, while out on a berry picking expedition with his parents. It was never mentioned in which direction the earlier indentations in the long grass were found, so it's not clear what relationship it had in terms of the distance to the lake. Ultimately, Eddie's body was discovered in a lake that had been dragged and searched multiple times, and he was never found until that date. There was no further reporting on this incident, and given that over 93 years have passed since then, all of the variables here will never be fully understood. Was he in the lake the entire time, or was he placed there afterwards? How did he even manage to get there? Were the indentations in the long grass anything to do with Eddie? It seems that these questions will never receive an answer. That was also the end of the paper trail on Eddie, so let's explore the next disappearance. The Warburton family, consisting of parents Doreen and Tom, and their children Gary and Andrew, made the trip from Hamilton, Ontario to see relatives in Beaver Bank near Dartmouth in Nova Scotia. The year was 1986 and the family arrived at their destination on the 1st of July. At the time, they were staying with an Aunt Helen and the Bulger family on Tucker Lake Road. Living opposite the Bulger family was the Carr family, of which the parents had twins around the age of Andrew, who was 9 years old. Andrew and Gary would always play with the twins when they came to town, and this day was no different. All four decided that they wanted to go swimming, and all parents agreed to this, and at 3:40 p.m, the boys set off for a 20-minute swim in the nearby lake. It's not clear why, but Andrew was delayed for reasons that I'm not aware of, and the three boys headed off without him. The path to the lake was directly behind the Carr family's home in the woodland. This path branches off into two directions. Going right will take you to Tucker Lake, while veering left will take you deeper into the woods. The twins' mother, Violet, was the last person to see Andrew at 4 p.m. on the back step of her home, but after that he was never seen again. Andrew never made it to the lake, and when the boys returned home for dinner, the alarm was raised when only 3 returned. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police were made aware of the situation and arrived at 5:45 p.m. All the while, the families and neighbours were already out mounting their own search for the boy. Another young boy by the name of Hob MacDonald was thought to be the last person to see Andrew. Hob had just returned home from a summer camp and told the authorities that he had seen Andrew earlier next to Beaverbank River. Hob recounted that Andrew took off his sneakers, crossed the stream and then put them back on. This surprised Doreen and Tom because Andrew was afraid of the river due to a prior incident involving leeches, and as a result, they said that Andrew avoided rivers. 45 minutes after the Royal Canadian Mounted Police arrived, tracking dogs were deployed inside the woods at 6:30 p.m. Shortly thereafter, 100 searchers flooded the scene and entered the woods. This was a very quick response by all measures. But sadly, the searchers didn't find any clues, and at no point did the dogs find his scent. On the 5th of July, 1986, the Brandon Sun reported this. 4 days after Andrew disappeared into dense woods outside Halifax, their 9-year-old is still missing despite the best efforts of hundreds of people who are combing the area looking for him. Search efforts were maintained overnight, with about 400 people scouring the woods near Beaver Bank, about 12.5 miles northwest of Halifax. In addition to the people in the woods, another 200 to 300 volunteers were on the site, ready to help teams of tired searchers coming out for a break. The search coordinator, Mike McKenzie, stated that the response from the locals had shown an overwhelming solidarity among the community. He said that they had over 1,000 people out in the woods at times. According to reports, the searchers fully expected to find the boy given the efforts, but this search was unsuccessful and Andrew was thought to have remained in the woods lost and alone. On the 3rd day of the search, the weather, which had been fine previously, took a turn for the worst when heavy rains poured through the area, forcing searchers to pull out of the woods for a period of time. The weather was said to have improved the following day when the searchers poured back in. Mike thought that the teams had made some progress when they stumbled upon some small footprints that they believed were created by Andrew. The footprints seemed to indicate that he was alone, but they said that they soon lost the tracks. 2 helicopters were up in the air above the finding, but unfortunately the pilots never made any sightings. The authorities must have been left a bit dumbfounded given the extensiveness and scope of the search involving many hundreds and upwards of 1,000 searchers at times. But this didn't provide any clues other than the finding of the footprints, which presumably must have stopped at some point. Given the futility and growing desperate, calls were made and divers along with 400 members of the Canadian military descended on the area. It seems that there must have been some confusion among the searchers because on the 7th, the Brandon Sun reported this. Several searchers claim to have seen the missing boy since Tuesday, but the area is heavily populated with deer and other wildlife. Mackenzie said overzealous searchers may have mistaken them for a fleeting boy. Mistaking a boy for a deer sounds very odd to me, but I presume these mistakes can and do happen in wooded areas. Though I'd like to rely on and hear from those who spend extended periods of time in the woods in regards to the likelihood of several, or perhaps many, misidentification incidents such as this from a whole range of people. Staff Sergeant Smith said that the reports were probably mistaken, as he didn't believe that the boy could have travelled as far as the searchers were reporting. Certainly strange, but again, it's best to hear from experts on this in regards to the ease of which these misidentifications can occur. According to search organisers, this was the biggest search effort in the history of Nova Scotia, with more than 3,000 people from all walks of life, engineers to woodmen, had scoured over 30 square miles of the area. Many are trying to keep an air of optimism in the face of fading hope from others present. Mike Mackenzie said that the searchers are still hopeful because of the large amount of fresh water in the area, as well as berries and other edible plants. Many searchers have been sitting silently in the trees overnight in the hopes of spotting the boy. The writer of the article goes on to relate a similar incident that occurred a month prior. Another boy, 15 years of age, called Kevin Schneider, disappeared in a wooded area in Ontario. 2 weeks after he disappeared, he was found passed away floating in the river. What was odd about Kevin's disappearance was that searchers believed that they were closing in on him at many points during the search. Searchers reported finding what they believed to be his footprints and fires left behind. They said that his tracks indicated long strides as though he was sprinting away. The question I would pose is, what was Kevin running away from? Did he feel scared or threatened? Did he believe that a nearby third party wanted to do him harm? Was Kevin severely confused and suffering from an irrational fear of the searchers? Perhaps he didn't know that they were searchers and instead thought that they were out to get him. If he had been spooked beforehand and then later heard footsteps near him, he could have ended up unknowingly running away from the searchers. It's strange, but I have seen this behaviour discussed by search and rescue personnel in other cases, or at least searchers theorising that's what may be occurring. In the case of Andrew, bad news arrived on the 9th, 8 days after the initial disappearance. Hundreds of military personnel were reportedly in the woods non-stop, and one soldier came across a pair of small sneakers which were identified as belonging to Andrew. Obviously at this point, this was where the coordinated search effort and the military personnel were now focused. According to the Brandon Sun, searchers found the body at about 5:20 PM, 100 metres away from the shoes. The body was found in an alder thicket in a gully of marshy ground, about 2 miles away from the home the Warburtons were visiting. It appeared he just got tired and put his head down to go to sleep, and that's how we found him, said Constable Dwayne King. The autopsy would later reveal that Andrew was likely to have passed away as a result of hypothermia. This was a heartbreaking disappearance, and unfortunately in the end, Andrew wasn't found in time, despite the search effort being as extensive and enormous in scope as it was. I wonder if the sightings early on were accurate, but similar to the theory on Kevin, Andrew was fearful and as a result was running away from the searchers, mistaking them as a threat. Ultimately, we will never know, and the best we can hope for now is that other families learn from this incident and don't leave their children to venture out into the woods alone. Mary Beyman disappeared on the 25th of July in 2019 from southeastern Manitoba in the Spare Woods. Mary had planned to go berry picking that day with a large group, and she had been to this exact location dozens of times before. In fact, her daughter stated that this was one of her favourite activities and that she was always out in this area picking them. This particular location was not far from her home in Mendocino and around 77 miles southeast of Winnipeg. Mary was partnered with another woman and they went to their usual spot in the woods and split up, but didn't part too far from one another. All members of the group had a whistle on hand for safety reasons, and it was also used when it was time to leave the woods. It's not clear when they agreed to leave the woods, but when they did, Mary's partner sounded her whistle, to which Mary seemed to have responded once with her own. This is what Mary's daughter, Maureen Gwertz, had to say. This is really bizarre because her partner had a whistle and she blew it when it was time to come out of the bush. And she swears she heard my mother blow the whistle. CBC.ca reported that the woman waited for around 15 minutes for Mary, but she didn't appear and it looks like Mary didn't sound her whistle again. At this point, those present knew something was wrong and the authorities were quickly made aware of the situation. Approximately 100 volunteers, most of which were experienced in search and rescue, were organised and arrived on scene. They found no trace of her that day, and search dogs arrived on the day afterwards, with aircraft also being deployed overhead. An area of over 40 square miles had been searched, but no sign of her was coming up, and the dogs were not finding a scent. One of the searchers, Lynn, said we're all baffled because it's as if she's disappeared into thin air. She was 84 years old, she couldn't exactly run a mile through the bush, so where is she? At the height of the search, they had over 1,000 people out there with dogs, horses, ATVs, drones, helicopters and 2 planes. All of the stops were being pulled out here. Mary was found 4 days later over a mile away at 8 PM on the 29th, huddled under a tree in a shallow hole that was filled with water. Mary's shoes were missing and she was somewhat dazed and said that she thought that she'd been there for around a day. Though she did let out a smile once she realised that she'd been discovered. Mary had sustained bruises and scratches and was unable to walk, but was otherwise okay. At first, Mary thought that she was hallucinating when the searchers came across her. I'm not sure if that indicates that she'd been hallucinating prior to this. The searcher who found her through the dense vegetation said you're not going to spend another night in this brush. What's interesting, and this was given short shrift, but it doesn't appear that the rescuers could actually get to her at first. And the fire department had to spend 2 hours clearing out the brush around her. Which is odd, the articles didn't seem to question that, but how did she even get in there if they first had to spend 2 hours cutting it away to reach her? Perhaps I'm misunderstanding something there. It's worth mentioning that all concerned were surprised that she was found in relatively good condition. She had no food or water with her other than the berries that she had previously picked. Maureen was warned and told by the authorities that on the 4th day they were likely searching for her body because of her lack of supplies. Now, there was another oddity surrounding Mary's discovery. The searchers who found her were Daryl Contuous and his son Beau. Daryl said that he had a dream the night prior in which his mother, who has long since passed, told him to go find Mary, which is exactly what he did. Mary's daughter said that she doesn't believe in magic, but she does find the circumstances of her mother's discovery strange. Daryl said that he didn't have the money to drive down, but oddly, a stranger did give him some cash to fund his trip after telling him what he was trying to do. I suppose you could say that it's an odd coincidence that he would have this dream and then drive to her exact location, but I don't really know how to comment on that other than saying that I suppose it is a bit odd. I'd just like to take the time to thank you for watching, and a big thank you to the patrons who've been running around and disappearing on the screen. If you found the video interesting, then please do leave a like, hit the bell and subscribe if you haven't already. If not, then feel free to leave a dislike, I'm just looking for your honest opinion either way. I hope that you've had a great day, or evening, depending on where you are, and I'll see you in the next one. Be safe, guys. Peace.